Hello everyone, welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish review. In today's Doctor Who Big Finish review, we're diving into the War Master Volume 6 Killing Time. Now I've literally just finished listening to this box set, so this review is going to be a little bit different because normally I script my Big Finish reviews, but I just thought, hey, I'm going to just do some off-the-cuff little reviews on the 4 stories what feature within this box set. So this box set definitely has intrigued quite a few people because it sees the return of Jo Jones and Nyssa, two characters who have a rich history of the Master, especially Nyssa because the Master basically killed her father, which is pretty grim, so there's a lot of unfinished business there, and Big Finish haven't really touched upon that, so this is, I guess, their first time dealing with that sort of aftermath of that. So if you haven't checked out any of the War Master box sets, then please do, because it's some of Big Finish's finest work and arguably the best Big Finish stuff what's being released right now of the current ranges. It's just superb. If you're thinking about picking up this box set because of the characters or the actual story itself, then I think you can, because other War Master box sets are very standalone, but the format for this box is very traditional War Master in the sense that it has all sort of an overarching plot, but the stories do feel very sort of self-contained in their own right. The first story is very much the foundations for the last story, which is basically the Master coming back for his revenge, and the other stories just sort of follow on into each other really, which is lovely, and they both have little specific plot points what link into the grander scheme of the box set itself. So that is essentially the format. The first story, The Sincerest Form of Flattery by James Goss. Like I said, this is very much laying down the foundations for the box set, as we see the Time Lords send the Master to be the ambassador for them as he arrives on this planet what's in a time lock. And the society can't age, so they're immortal, and they sort of have a sort of a curious relationship with the Time Lords because the society think that the Time Lords put this curse on them with this sort of stagnant protocol, which will be explored later throughout the box set. So I'm not going to reveal what the stagnant protocol is, and we see the Master trying to begin to manipulate the society so he can get what he wants and what the Time Lords want, and the scene. It's quite a black comedy scene at the start with the Master thinking he's got his champion but realising that he doesn't have a tongue, so he's not exactly going to be able to do what the Master says and sort of spout off the Master's speeches of lies. So this is where we meet Calantha, which becomes sort of the Master's main villain of the box set, and I think that the Master's definitely met his match with Calantha. So this is done very well. We see them go to dinner together, which very much reminds me of sort of the Boomtown scenes between Margaret and the Ninth Doctor. Very rich character scenes, sort of talking about their goals and ambitions. It's all wonderfully stuff, and we see the Master sort of reference to the vineyard from the Skymen, which is great. Not great little nod from the previous story, which I thought was really nice. So throughout the story, we see the Master sort of trying to gauge people in various high up places in the court of the Blind Empress, and trying to work his way up the social ladder so he can gain control of the society. And meanwhile in the background, Calantha's doing the same, but is doing it more discreetly. So the Master has found his new champion in the form of the Blind Empress's son, who he thinks is going to be the perfect one to sort of topple over this old regime so he can rise and take power and take charge of a society. But let's say that the Empress's son isn't too keen on the idea. So the Master starts to begin his sort of plot of spreading rumours that there's a food shortage and there's a sort of a plague on the outskirts of the planets to really sort of scaremonger the people that the Blind Empress isn't going to help you. You know, her son is the one who's going to help. And Calantha's big thing is that she wants to be transparent with her policies and politics, you know, so that the people know the truth. And it's amazing how this story is very much a social commentary on the government. This was recorded pre-pandemic, and it's amazing how accurate this story takes the government, and it's just crazy how stark a reminder this is. It's a great little social commentary on government sort of transparency, which I really do like. Now there is some brilliant sound design as we see one of the people get the mysterious space plague, where we see one of the stagnant protocol people basically be aged to death, and the sound design for that is utterly brilliant, and we'll explore the plague later on within the box set. But the prince is off to find a cure for the plague itself, so for now the War Master has lost the battle. Calantha has become Empress of the society, And yeah, sometimes you have to lose a battle to win a war. So this is a really great opening to Boxer. I think that it's a real strong foundation, great world building, the society, what will be explored later on in Unfinished Business. It is a real great opener to the Boxer. I think that is a very solid start to this box set. The second story is A Quiet Night by Lou Morgan. Now this isn't a quiet night listening to this story. This is really traumatic. This is the Joe Jones story of the box set. Now the War Master range does have a few sort of experimental traumatic listens like the Skymen and Persistence of Dreams from Master Callus. It does some weird wacky stuff. This and the Orphan is very much like this, but I think the Quiet Night is definitely the closest to that sort of wacky traumatic story. So we see Jo arrive at her uncle's, and her uncle seems to be the Master, but she doesn't know that. And she's here for a party, and there seems to be sort of this business, so Jo feels very confused, thinking, oh, have I got the right date? Very much like how Katie Manning is in real life, that sort of flustered sort of wackiness. So this story really plays with that sort of thing, because we see the Master play mind games with Jo with this sort of house shifting things around. She thinks that these two people who are there are plotting against her uncle, that they want to take all his money and all that sort of stuff. So we see Jo become very disorientated, very confused. And this story, when you're listening to it, it has a tendency to make you feel very disorientated and very sort of confused, so you feel like Jo in the story. It's a story what naturally pushes you away when you're listening to it. It's not a story what you can sit back and relax and listen to and enjoy. It's a story what you really have to fight with to try and get something out of it. And I think that's what I really admire about this story. Because you really feel that confusion, that disorientation that Jo has. And yeah, I'm not going to say whether Jo or Nyssa survive, because whoever meets the War Master doesn't really survive. And I think by using an older Jo and Nyssa, there is that sort of uncertainty whether they will survive. Because if they were using the younger Jo, much like in Masterful, we know that she's going to survive. But with this, we really don't. And the final 10 minutes are just really horrendous, absolutely horrendous. The sound design really aids that confusion. The reveal when Jo finds out that her uncle is the Master, really just, I had goosebumps. It was just really chilling. It was really horrendous. And you know, we see how there are some revelations back to her unit days, and why does the Master want this mysterious vial? Yeah, I'm just going to say that this is just one traumatic listen, and it's just really heartbreaking to listen to, because we know that the War Master's evil, and we see him do these really evil things throughout his range to these other characters who he's just met. But because we know Jo and Nyssa, it makes it even more harder and traumatic, because we know and love these characters and we want them to win. So this is really sort of traumatic, because we really don't know if they're going to make it out. And seeing the Master do these horrible things to characters that we love, it just makes him even more evil. And I think that this box set definitely proves that the War Master is the most evil Master. So that's all I'm going to say on A Quiet Night. It's a brilliant listen. It's a story what you really have to fight with to listen to. And yeah, this is the thing with this box set. You cannot binge listen to it. You can't just binge this box set because of just how rich the stories are. You need that time away from listening to it to digest about what's happened within the story, because they're so traumatic and depressing. You just want to sit down with a cup of tea going, my god, am I going to recover from it? Let's find out in The Orphan. The Orphan by Lou Morgan, Nyssa's story. So the Master has unfinished business as he's going to visit the orphan Nyssa. So this is a wonderfully, I would say this is my favourite story of the box set. I think that this is a really great sort of character piece between the Master and Nyssa. As we see Nyssa researching the space plague. So this is where we get the whole idea of the plague explored, of how it sort of affects people. And the plague idea within this is absolutely horrible, that we see people age to death, but they relive their most traumatic memories. And that's the only thing they remember, so they sort of die screaming in agony. So it's really horrendous. So we see Nyssa working on this sort of space station, trying to find a vaccine. And we sort of get the Empress's son saying, oh, I'm too busy to do this, I'm busy redecorating a conference call. Does that ring any bells? We see the Master pretending to be somebody else, and we get some really touching moments between the Nyssa and the Master. The Master talks about family, so he's already starting to prod Nissa about family and starting to get enjoyment out of that. But there's a great scene about the War Master pretending to speak about his family, about his grandchildren, his family, but they're all gone now because of whatever reason, because of the war. It's really rich character stuff. And throughout the story we just see how exhausted Nissa, and we see the Master start manipulating Nissa by using her good faith and just trying to save everyone and not let anybody down. So the Master really manipulates that side of Nissa, that good-hearted nature, to his advantage. And we see the vial from A Quiet Night come back into the story and how that sort of ties into the grand scheme of the story. And I have to say, the final 20 minutes of the story is just really gut-wrenching stuff, as we see Nissa really put through every emotional roller coaster, because it is a really tough story for Nissa, as we see a load of patients die and she's thinking that it's from her own negligence, and the Master just really utilizes that guilt and sorrow to his advantage. And honestly, it was just a great confrontation between Nissa finding out that that's the Master, the person who took her father. So there's some real great character moves within there, and I think that's why I really enjoy this story, because we see all sort of facets of the War Master. We see this sweet, charming old man who won't do you any harm, but by the end of it you're like, yeah, he could kill me any minute now. And the ending for this story, my god, my goodness, yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. It's pretty rough. This is our second time with Nissa sort of after the Time War. The first one was in A Short Trip, which is, I think, 2 hearts, a heart on both sides, I think, which you don't need to listen to enjoy this story. But my goodness, this was a rough listen too, and I think that this is my personal favourite of the box set. That's all I'm going to say. It's a good one, so I'm going to give this story a 9 out of 10. Unfinished Business by James Goss. Now this is very much the Master picking up from where he left off with the Stagnant Protocol. So we see a rematch with the War Master and Calantha, as the War Master has the vaccine and he's using that to manipulate Calantha to submit so he can sort of rise up into power. So he becomes the Regent Chancellor, and you see him sort of manipulating the society once again. But Calantha knows that it ain't gonna happen. So she sends off 4 assassins to basically kill the Master, which is a wonderful little scene between the War Master facing off these 4 assassins, with him going, well, I can definitely take 2 of you with me, I just haven't decided which 2. Which I think was a wonderful scene, just showing how evil he is. This is when we sort of see Calantha go against her sort of moral code of being transparent with the public. She starts to lie and sort of become like the Master, start manipulating people to believe her lies. We see her visit the Master in this sort of secluded retreat, which is basically a prison. And the way Calantha tortures the Master within this as sort of a punishment, whether that be the wallpaper or the sort of being in sort of starvation, all links to how the Master has basically ruined the Stagnant Protocol society, which I thought was really quite grim and dark. So it just shows how equal these 2 characters are with their sort of moral code, as we see Calantha starting to begin a deal with these Dalek ambassadors, which is really sort of starts to heat the story up. The Daleks don't actually feature within the story, but you can see that there is sort of a presence there within the story itself. And the final 15 minutes, my goodness, we see sort of the Master keep his promise to Calantha, and this is some real great stuff when we sort of see her saying that, the Regent Chancellor's died, so we're having this big old funeral, and the funeral reveal of the Master, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Derek Jacobi is just absolutely on fire as he starts to crush everything Calantha has built, and he starts to become the person in charge of this empire, of the Stagnant Protocol. And the way he does it and crushes Calantha, it just feels very sort of bittersweet in a way, because you're really rooting for the Master. As that Calantha basically give the War Master a strand of new plague, and sort of having the Master sort of relive all the torture and torment that he's caused to people. He was reveling in it, so we get to see how hideously monstrous this Master is. The War Master has some brilliant witty dialogue saying that, you think the Daleks are just got to pass through, they're going to come here and do some shopping and genocide, they're not going to just pass through. And I really love the dialogue the War Master has within this story. Now this story does have some great sort of twists and turns about the Stagnant Protocol and how the people of the Stagnant Protocol became like they were, and the origin of the plague. That's all I'm going to say. It's a really interesting, great little twists and turns throughout this story, and a wonderful way to conclude this box set. So I'm going to give Unfinished Business a well-deserved 8 out of 10. So what are my overall thoughts on the War Master Killing Time? Well, this box set certainly did kill me. My goodness, this was a tremendous listen. This just proves why Derek Jacobi's master is one of the most evil, if not the evilest master out there, playing the long game. That despite him losing a battle, he's going to come back with vengeance, and I really love it. It just shows this sort of steely determination of this master, using characters that we all know and love like Joe and Nissa, and putting it up against the most horrendous master. Honestly, chills, it's traumatic, it's brilliant, and this just proves why the War Master range is the champion of the recent Big Finish releases. The War Master continues to deliver a really great story, wonderfully consistent. There is not a bad War Master box set out there, and this box set continues to be a trendsetter. This is a wonderful 4-part story. You know, this is a wonderful 4-hour journey what you go on with the War Master, and it is just a tremendous listen. So I highly recommend you check out the War Master Killing Time. Even if you haven't checked out the War Master stuff, this definitely proves why the War Master is one of the best incarnations of the Master. Derek Jacobi, Katie Manning, Sarah Sutton and Alexandra Riley do a tremendous job, and I absolutely love it. It is a wonderful box set what I can see revisiting in the years to come. It is a wonderful set, and definitely is one of the highlights of the War Master range so far. So thank you very much everyone for watching this review. I'll see you next time for more Big Finish related content in the near future.